October 25. So let's just go around. Wow, why am I hearing myself here?
It's good. It's good to hear yourself.
It's so
Recording in progress.
See?
Why?
Thank
Maybe
you,
the
Hal.
computer's telling you.
So let's just go around the table and identify ourselves for the record. So Howard, would you start?
Sure. Good afternoon. Howard D'Amico, Finance Committee.
Ryan Hogan?
Sandy Pipers?
Dick Vandenberg.
Lynn Mazzulli.
Carol Goggins.
We have 13.
Is anybody on via Zoom?
Or is it 14?
Okay.
Bob Sullivan.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
Telling him it's down
Good, how you doing?
Great, thanks.
currently.
Okay, everybody have their agendas in front of them? Man, this is really,
I wasn't sure if I captured that in the budget when I
I'm not used to that. All right, our first agenda item is to go through the warrant.
Budget amount?
Everybody have the wording in front of them?
Okay, the count with me.
And we went through this 2 weeks ago.
Oh, 13.
So Sandy has agreed to make the
This
motions,
one's back.
Okay.
and Lynn has agreed to be the seconder, so we can carry on. So Sandy, you have the floor.
Okay, first one is Article 1, fiscal year 2023 budget transfer and amendments. I move the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $142,562 and transfer the sum of $7,950 from ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation for a total of $150,512 to fund the following amendments to Article 2 of the annual town meeting of Monday, May 2, 2022.
You don't have to read all of
Oh,
all of
thank
those, okay?
I was wondering if she was going to have to do that.
So I'm confused,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
yeah.
Is that her actual motion, or is that her reading the motion?
I think what Howard's trying to say, I think the motion should be, we vote to recommend to move.
Oh, I see what
We
you said,
we
yeah.
vote to recommend, that Article 1 be approved at town meeting.
Well, yeah, that's, Gene, I'm going to defer to you here.
I just want the funding sources, so we would vote to recommend that the town raise and appropriate the sum of, so you're not saying I move the town, but you're voting to recommend that the town.
Right.
So before the meeting tonight, I talked to Gene about, can't we vote to recommend the article as presented?
Yeah.
But we needed to read the whole thing out, right?
Well, I wanted the funding, because the funding sources aren't included in some of the articles, and if someone was listening, I wanted them to know that it was coming, the recommendation was coming from a transfer from free cash, for instance, for some of the articles.
Okay.
So the motion is to recommend.
So how would I say that? We move to recommend,
Well, no, it's just standard. It's what we'd always do. I make a motion to vote to recommend, or
Okay.
to vote, really.
Yeah.
As to whether we'd recommend, and then
Okay.
we vote. But do we want to debate first, or move right to votes?
I think once it's made and seconded, then we can talk about it.
Then we do, after a second, we can talk about it,
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
So the motion is to recommend Article 1, as you read all the detail,
Yes.
and then Lynn seconds.
I second it.
Any debate on, or discussion or questions on Article 1? Anybody? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Motion carries. All right, Sandy?
Article 2, Capital Stabilization Fund. So I'm going to say, I make a motion to recommend
Right.
that the town vote to establish, under the provision of Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5B, a special purpose stabilization fund to be used for the future purpose of fire suppression vehicles exceeding 26,000 pounds GVW with necessary major equipment and all associated costs.
I second the motion.
I think that's gross vehicle weight, right?
Yes.
Okay.
GVW, okay. Any discussion on that motion? Anybody?
Did I miss the meeting where there was an explanation of that?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think it was at the last meeting, and we've decided to start saving money for the big equipment that we need to purchase for the fire department, like the new trucks.
This is just to create a base fund, to put money that later gets approved,
Yes,
correct?
this is not a funding, this is not putting money in, it's just
It's just
creating.
create the base
A second
place to put it.
stabilization for this specific purpose.
Okay.
And the chair of the capital committee did make a presentation, I think back in September.
2 meetings ago, I believe, yeah.
Okay, which I did miss. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on Article 2? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstain, motion carries. Sandy?
Article 3, Municipal Center oil spill. I make a motion to recommend that the town vote to transfer the sum of $65,000 from free cash to amend Article 8 of the November 8, 2021 special town meeting warrant for the purpose of remaining cleanup costs, additional engineering costs, and all other associated costs arising from an oil spill in the municipal center basement.
I second the motion.
Okay, Lynn seconds. Any comments or questions on that one, anybody? Matt, has anything changed since you updated us on this last time?
So yesterday, we filed with DEP all the necessary paperwork to close the incident as a Tier 2 incident. So we're recharacterizing it from Tier 1 to Tier 2. So it's not an imminent hazard anymore, it's a resolved situation. Obviously, we're waiting for their approval of that. What remains is a couple of test holes will be re-established. We have a couple of barrels of things that need to be taken out of here and disposed of, and the final engineering closing costs, the reports. That's what's left to do here.
Are you pretty comfortable with the 65,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Matt or Jean, anybody? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Sandy?
Okay, so this is, before I make this motion, we have discussion after this motion as to what this is?
So we'll have the motion and have it be seconded, and then Bob, you're available, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, he can speak to that in some detail, so we'll make the motion first, okay?
Okay. I make a motion to recommend that the town appropriate $200,000 to pay costs of lead service line inventory and replacement program, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to General Ledger, Chapter 44, Section 7, General Ledger, Chapter 29C, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefor. The 2021 lead copper rule revisions require all public water systems to complete an inventory of utility and customer-owned service lines connected to its distribution system and prepare a replacement plan by October of 2024. All or any portion of this borrowing may be obtained through the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust, the trust, through a 100% loan forgiveness, loan, or otherwise.
I second the motion.
Okay, so if you still have your thing from 2 weeks ago, this wording was changed a little bit. So Bob, we're going to give you the floor right now, okay, to kind of explain what's going on here?
Yeah, so I'm sure you were all aware of the Flint, Michigan issue several years ago. So ever since that issue, the federal government and the states have been cracking down on lead and copper, mostly lead. So they've gone through some things, they've revised the rules over the last few years, and this is the most recent revision to the rule. So what they're requiring us to do is, they had a method for testing the most likely sites that would indicate whether or not we have an issue with corrosion control, that there's lead leaching out of the lead solder in houses. So there was a formula that you follow, kind of a house was built between a certain year that used the old lead solder and the kind of cheap copper that was made in the 80s. So if you had a house that was built within those years, they figured that was the most susceptible to lead leaching out of the service or the pipes. So we have to establish a lead sampling plan based on that. So we went around, we tested pipes inside houses to determine if they had lead solder, if they were built within those years. So we did that. Our lead and copper has still come back good. We haven't had any issues. We do treat to prevent corrosion in the pipes. So after the Flint, Michigan issue, they started going further in depth with it. So there's some systems that have services from the main that's in the road to the house that are all 100% lead. We don't have any full lead services in Douglas, but this is part of the requirement, is to go around and identify if there's any lead services. So that's an easy one, and we already know we can say we don't have any of those. But we do have lead goosenecks on some. So depending on the year they were built, there's a little piece of lead, because lead is bendable, and they used to use iron services. Now we use plastic or copper. So the old iron services were so stiff, if you would have any shift in the ground from frost or whatever, you needed something a little flexible to make that connection so it didn't just break off. So they always used a little piece of lead that had a little bit of flexibility to it. So now they're requiring systems to go and try to identify what the material is that's going into the house, so they can kind of determine if it may have a lead gooseneck. We actually, as part of this, we were looking at one process of digging up services where the shutoff valve is, so that we could determine what material is on the customer side and what material is on the town side, because those could actually be different. As part of the article, there was mention of the SRF for the funding. Well, SRF shot down our method of doing that test, so they want us to use a different method, which I think is less effective, or less correct, I should say, because it doesn't matter what's coming through the house. I mean, we've had breaks in services that somewhere outside we could have changed the material, so it's not really indicative, but that's the method they want us to use. So this article, we don't really intend to spend any money, because they've kind of indicated that through the SRF process, if you apply for this and receive the authorization through the SRF, that there's going to be 100% principal forgiveness, which means it'll be fully funded through the state. If they do not approve us for the SRF, I don't really have any intention of moving forward with that program, and we would find a different method to go through this process ourselves. So that's kind of the quick summary of it. If anyone has any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
What's SRF?
It's the state revolving fund.
Okay.
So the Mass DEP has a fund that's set up where they have millions of dollars in it, and then every year they do a funding source. Well, typically the SRF is a low interest loan, so it's typically a 2% loan. So it would be a little more affordable for systems to be able to do projects that they couldn't with higher interest rates. In the past few years, it was more feasible for us to just go through local borrowing, because there's a lot of red tape involved when you go through the SRF process. So it just kind of adds some cost to the project, but if all those costs are covered through 100% principal forgiveness, it makes it worth kind of jumping through their hoops to do the project that way.
So Bob, it looks like it's just public water, correct? This doesn't affect people that have their own wells. Am I right on that?
Correct.
And of the citizens of Douglas, how many people are on town water? Any idea?
About 3,800 people on the system.
And you feel pretty confident you have a good sense of the piping going into all these houses?
Yeah, so anytime we change meters or we go in to do a final read, we have forms that we fill out internally, and we identify the material coming into the house, the size of it, the type of the pipe that it is, whether it's plastic, copper, iron, and then what size it is. So we document that as we go along. That didn't happen in the past, so we don't have the entire system identified. But they have some newer technology and methods that they could use. It's kind of like a modeling, so they'll go in and identify all the materials that they have, and then they'll base it on building permits and years houses were built and years the mains were put in, to kind of put it through a statistical program that will kind of identify with a reasonable, expectation that these certain houses probably have a lead gooseneck.
And then the 200,000, you said you might not need it because of low-interest loans or grants or something? Can you repeat that again?
So in order to get any of the SRF loans, if you apply for an SRF loan, you're required to have it approved at town meeting for the funding. So you have to fund it in full, that the town has agreed that they want to do this project and fund it. And then you get the loan through the state, and it's a low-interest loan. But this is the first time they've offered 100% principal forgiveness, which means if you take a $200,000 loan, they're going to forgive all the principal balance, which would mean the entire loan would be forgiven.
So if the town meeting approves the 200,000, it's basically to show that the town is behind it, but the actual funding could come from the state?
Correct. And if the state does not approve us for the funding, my intention would be to go in a different route and not move forward with the contract that we have a proposal for to do this project.
Okay. Anybody else questions?
Is it-
Sandy?
Yes, is this just inventory, or is it actually doing it? Do you have to perform any work? Like,
This is just inventory. So to do the work, it would probably be in the 7-figure range.
Okay. And customers themselves, if it's on their property, are they responsible, and the town's only responsible for what's on town land?
So this is part of the conversations we've been having with the state as systems. We've had plenty of meetings with them where we go back and forth and argue our complaints, and the way it's always been is we own up to the curb stop, which is at the property line. The customer owns from the curb stop into the house. But the state is trying to push that this inventory, so I technically don't have to do any other remediation or change the services at this point. They want an inventory, and then part of how they're designing the program is if you do exceed a lead action level, then they're going to require you to start a program as to how you're going to replace the services to mitigate that problem. So I don't see us having to go forward much beyond doing the inventory part. We'll probably have to write a plan on what our plan would be if we do need to move forward with changing some of the lead or the services that may have had lead. So we'll have to come up with a plan, but until we trigger an action level, we shouldn't have to replace anything. But the way it's always been is the customer is responsible from the property line into their house, and we're responsible from the property line to the main.
Okay, and this has to be done. Once the problem is documented, then it becomes real.
Whether you document it or not, if we exceed a lead action level, they require action. If we don't have a plan in place and we haven't come up with something that says, all right, we have a plan, we just need to follow it and implement it, then you don't have a problem. So whether it's on paper or not, it's going to be an issue if we trigger that number, which we haven't in the 13 years I've been here. So I feel confident that we're in a good position. Our system's fairly good the way it's set up. We don't have full lead service lines. The lead gooseneck is, like a foot long, so it's a very small section. We've changed a lot of them over the years as we do do services if we have a leak. If we come across one, we always pull it out and change it so that it's no longer there. Any of these projects that we did, like the small section of North Street, Gilboa Street, we're going to do Northeast Main, Northeast Main this next spring. Those sections, we've already replaced all those service lines from the main to the curb, so there's no lead goosenecks there anymore. If we move forward with some of the other projects we're looking at, potentially North Street. So any of the mains that were put in that are ductile iron won't have a lead gooseneck, so we can eliminate those from the program. So we're kind of limited on our exposure as to what we may have to move forward on. It's just a matter of how more in-depth the state gets on it.
But we really have no choice.
Correct. We are required to have this done by, I forget what the date was, it's in 2024, I believe, October maybe?
That's what the article says, October 2024.
Yeah, so October 2024. So, like I said, if we don't receive the state funding for it, which, I mean, we would be insane not to apply for it, but they're going to forgive the whole thing. So it's $200,000 worth of work that we could potentially get for free.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Comments or questions?
I have a couple.
Okay, Brian?
Bob, when you say inventory, you're talking about counting things as opposed to collecting equipment, right?
Correct. No equipment. We're just going to go out and look. The contractor would come in and they would do basement inspections as to where the pipe comes through the house. If it's a plastic service line or a copper service line, then they're not concerned about having exposure with the lead. If it's an iron service, then that's going to go on the list as identified as a potential site that has a lead gooseneck. And if we triggered a number, an action level that would require us to do anything, we would start replacing lines with those iron services. So there's very few iron services left. We don't have a lot of them left. Typically, most of the iron services have corroded enough over the years that they've sprung a leak, and if we have an iron service that has a leak, we typically have it replaced.
So when you say you're replacing those, you mean that they'd go to the top of the list to be replaced? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So that's what it means by a replacement plan. So we have to come up with an inventory, and then we come up with a plan as to if we trigger an action level, which ones are we going to replace and a percentage of how many we have in the system. There's a bunch of it in the regulation. I think it's like 3%. 3% of the services that are either unknown or are confirmed iron services potentially with a lead gooseneck, you would have to replace like 3% per year. It's something along those lines. They haven't finalized some of that, but that's the intent. So yes, it would be start with the ones that are the highest risk and start replacing those first.
And I assume we're hiring someone to do this, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Another question on the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust and the loan forgiveness. Are you aware of any community who has successfully done this?
This is the first time they've offered it with the 100% principal forgiveness.
Okay.
So I live in Dudley. We did secure an SRF loan for a treatment plant for the PFAS that you probably all heard about in the news.
Yep.
So they put a $12 million treatment plant that they're in the middle of building, and I think we're at like 21 or they haven't come up with the final number, but it's between 21 and 31% principal forgiveness. So we have secured that loan. So I have seen it work in the programs, but this is, like I said, the first time they've offered 100% principal forgiveness. So this hasn't been offered yet, so nobody's even applied for these loans yet under this program.
And there's no concern that everybody will now apply for them and there won't be enough money for everybody?
Oh, everyone will definitely apply for it, because it's insane not to if you're going to get it done for free.
Right.
So that's why I said if we do not get approved through the SRF program, that I would take a different approach to this, and I wouldn't hire out through a subcontractor or the engineering firm that we're using. If we're going to pay for it out of our ratepayers' funds, I'll come up with a more effective measure that I think would be more effective. And we would do it internally as opposed to hire a subcontractor.
Okay. Does this qualify for another of the ARPA funds, by any chance?
Well, the way the article, it's not a raise and appropriate.
Okay, so we are using the ARPA.
Well, the way the article's written, it's through borrowing, Bob. You didn't offer another alternative for this article.
I would not want to use the ARPA funds for this project. I think ARPA funds can be better spent. As I said before, I don't agree with the way they're approving the method of going through doing this inventory. But if they're going to pay for it, I'll go with their method. If they're not going to pay for it and we're going to pay for it, I'm going to use a different method that I would prefer. And I think, we've kind of put several projects forth for the ARPA funding. If some of those projects go forward with the water main replacement, when we replace a water main, it would be another big chunk of the town that we would be eliminating as potential lead goosenecks because we would replace that as we do the main.
Right.
So,
Bob has spent the ARPA funds over 10 times, right?
yeah, I can just keep spending them if they can come up with a way to multiply them.
His proposals
Perfect.
far exceeded the ARPA grant.
Okay.
Yeah, I think all of mine exceeded the funds.
So finally, so your plan would be, if we didn't get the loan forgiveness, you'd come up with another plan and then come back to town meeting to get that funded. Is that is that my understanding correct?
So it would either be, depending on what I can come up with a cost-effective way to do it, it would either be done through my budget. I would talk to the commissioners and say, look, we have to have this done by October 2024, so we would budget for that within our budget and move forward through the enterprise fund budget.
But in that situation, the ratepayers would pay for it as opposed to trying to get.
Correct, which is why I don't like their method, because it's a little bit wasteful with the money.
Right.
So I would prefer to do it more cost-effective through our methods and using our staff as opposed to paying subcontractors at prevailing wage and, crazy prices, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. Anybody else? Comments or questions for Bob?
One last thing.
Sandy?
When will you know how the funding will go? What will?
It's typically April, May timeframe. So we would apply now and then we would find out spring. And then we would look at, if we got approved for that funding, we would be looking at doing it over this next summer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Comments or questions? Gene, do you have a comment or observation on this? All right, everybody set for the motion then? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Robert, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. Have a good night.
All right, take care.
Good night.
All right, let's go to Article 5. Sandy.
Article 5, grading and slope easement. I make a motion that the town vote to...
Recommend.
Recommend.
Yeah.
I make a motion to recommend that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to grant a permanent and exclusive grading and slope easement bounded and described as set forth below for the purpose of economic development, that the chief procurement officer be required to put this asset out for public bidding in accordance with the procedure specified in Mass General Ledger, Chapter 30B, Section 16, if required, for the conveyance of an interest in real property.
Now, second, thank you, Lynn. So Gene, 2 weeks ago in the handout we had all this jazz, but that doesn't need to be listed here, is that
No.
correct? Okay. Is everybody clear on the property that was involved with this, do you remember? Yeah, it's the town boundary between Douglas and Uxbridge, northeast Maine, over there by Dunkin' Donuts, right? It's up in there is where it is, I think, and the Shell
I know,
station. Yeah.
Matt, speak to this.
All right, any questions or comments on that?
law.
Everybody good? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
I'll abstain, please.
Okay, one abstention. Motion carries. All right, and so Ryan abstained, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Sandy, carry on.
Article 6, Council on Aging, is that COA?
Yep.
Okay, bus. I make a motion to recommend that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $115,000 for the purpose of funding the purchase of a Council on Aging bus and all associated costs of equipping the vehicle.
I second the motion.
So if you recall, everybody, 2 weeks ago, that was XXXXX, and so now the dollar amount is $115,000. I was at the capital committee today when we talked about this, and I guess the idea is that when we used to share the van with Sutton, whenever you get these things through grants, they tend to be used. The state doesn't have new ones that it gives you when you get a grant for it. And I guess the one that we shared with Sutton 15 years ago or so was always breaking down, and it was just really unreliable. So this would be for a brand new one, I think. And it wouldn't be anything we share with anybody else. And the idea was, as we explained to us today, the number of senior citizens that we have that don't drive anymore is really going up. And the Elder Bus company out of Southbridge, I think, that we have been using, they don't go to some of the places that some of our seniors need to go. So this would be our own new one to service just our own people, and it wouldn't be sharing with Sutton or Uxbridge or somebody else.
Is this what we were going to use ARPA funds for? I remember a discussion on using ARPA funds for this.
Matt, could you use ARPA funds for a COA bus, a van, or not?
Still trying to chase this. So there's more than one way to fund this, right? And they've all been put forward to the different committees that can decide it. The select board voted to put this on the warrant, right? So that, because it includes other budgetary items, it includes an expense item for fuel, it includes compensation for the drivers. It is an ARPA eligible project, so it's also on the ARPA list. So there's this more than one way to fund it, depending on what source you want to fund, how you want to fund it. So this is how the select board has chosen to go, just to put it on the warrant and ask town meeting for the funds.
They've chosen not to use ARPA for this.
To this point, they have not chosen to use ARPA for it.
Explain what ARPA is.
American Rescue Plan Act funds from the federal government. Think of it as the last great stimulus before the end of stimulus funds. So this would be the bill that was passed by the Biden administration through the new Congress. There was an allocation of funds through the United States Treasury to counties and municipalities around the country. Worcester County is defunct, so Worcester County's allocation was done by population, and then Douglas as a municipality also got an allocation. The sum total of all of that's about $2.7 million. It is a federal grant, self-administered. So we have to report, but it's not like getting some of the grants that we've gotten, for instance, for the pipe projects, where we're writing a report almost every week and everything's right down to the last penny and a million people see it. ARPA is much more loosey-goosey. It's stimulus money. It's supposed to go out and be spent for eligible projects.
So Matt, if the town meeting approves this, it's to be determined yet where the 115 will come from then?
No, if town meeting approves this, the funding source approved by town meeting is the
Okay.
funding source that'll be used. I don't know what Gene.
Free cash.
From free cash.
Free cash, yeah.
Okay. Oh, right, okay.
Has anybody thought about where this is going to be housed? Where is this? We don't-
Behind the senior center, there's a place for it.
Is it enclosed garage?
I think so.
There's no garage.
No, there's no,
Oh, there's no garage there? Okay, it's just behind it then.
So basically, it's going to sit out in the weather. And then when they have to use it, they got to shovel it off.
So it was my understanding when we were discussing this before that this was an ARPA project, and that's off the table? Or,
No, I'm sorry to confuse people, but I have put it through the process with two potential funding sources.
okay.
Because the project proponents asked for those approaches. So the select board chair, who does support the project, asked the select board to put it on the warrant for a vote. Because the vote will come through town meeting will also include the funds to run the service and to run the bus. ARPA money would only be used to purchase a bus. So it is confusing, I get it, but at the end of the day, it's alive in two places. If it gets life in one place, it'll probably die in the other place, right? But the only way you're going to be able to start the service right away would be that if you have to set aside the funds, not only for the bus, but for the people to drive it, person to drive it on a regular basis, and the fuel.
I'm sorry, you said so ARPA funds will be used? Isn't it could be used?
No, could be used.
Could be used, okay. Maybe I heard you wrong. I just want to make sure I understood. Could be used.
So in other words, if town meeting were to vote it down, I wouldn't recommend any select board member do this, but it is theoretically possible that if town meeting voted it down, the select board could vote to use ARPA funds to buy a bus. But they would still have to come to town meeting with the budget to ask for funds for the staff to drive it and for the expense items to run it.
And it really would sit there.
It truly, well,
Because it would move.
assuming that we,
Gas and-
assuming we get it that fast, right? There's a lead time on all vehicles right now.
So if it's approved at town meeting, is it definitely going to be funded through free cash, or is it still possible it could be funded through ARPA funds?
To me, if town meeting votes it, the funding mechanism approved in the motion by town meeting is how it would be
Okay.
funded.
Okay. Just trying to get clarification.
Yep.
Yeah.
But did they give us, I mean, how many people are actually going to use this? Did they?
That's what I was going to ask, Dick. Did you get any information on this, or what the schedule's going
Well,
to
she
be?
didn't- She didn't give numbers, like 50 or 80 or whatever, but she did say it's a growing number of people can't drive. But I don't recall if she said a specific number, Carol, so. Jean, do you have a sense of that, or Matt?
I wasn't there for her presentation today.
Yeah, my reluctance, Mr. Chairman, only comes from the fact that Patrice put a lot of work into this, and I don't know why. I guess we missed it in the shuffle to ask her to come tonight, because she should be speaking to it as the director. We have a clientele at the Adult Social Center that has grown considerably since over the last 5 years. And more activities are offered that are more and more popular. We have quite a significant enrollment of people. A number of people cannot drive themselves to the center, so we are no longer able to have their company at the center unless they get a ride from a family member or find some other way to get there. But we don't have a bus to go pick them up and bring them in for nutrition or socialization or anything else that they use. The other issue that has come up, and I'm sure it's around half a dozen or more, seek regular medical assistance on the campus of the Milford Regional Hospital. We don't have any bus service that runs to Milford. So even if you just brought 3 or 4 people each week or every 2 weeks to the hospital, it'd be significant value add for them and their lives. I come at this a little bit differently. This is an asset that will last for many years, so it's not just the immediate need, which I think Patrice has certainly convinced me that there's an immediate need. She's obviously convinced other people in town on the select board and other places of that. What impresses me the most is the rapid rate at which the elder population in the town of Douglas will grow over the next 5 years. Whether the town itself grows or not, you have a town census, so it's not a mystery. You can look and see who's 62, 63, 64
Or you
in
could
5
not.
years from
I
now.
would rather not.
Well, we're planning, Howard, we're planning
Kidding.
the population to be served by various services at the Adult Social Center could double in the next 10 years.
10,000
So-
baby boomers a day are aging into Medicare.
You know these.
But I'm,
Policies for all.
we really dug into the stats to have this conversation because it's a forward-looking planning thing. The bus isn't going to go away in 2 years. We'd still hope to have it on the road 10 years from now. And 10 years from now, it will probably be too small.
Matt, can I ask a couple
Yeah.
questions?
Sure.
Yeah. So I
The
think,
chairman will tell you if you can ask questions.
so I think you just answered one. Is the general perception that the mileage on this will be such that it hopefully has a good 10-year shelf life on it, on this bus bought new, roughly? It's not a 4-year car.
No, it's not. It's not a cruiser, a police cruiser that's going to drive all over the place
All right.
and run 24/7 or
Yeah.
16
Yeah.
hours a day.
Okay, so it's got a longer shelf life. And then, Matt, you said, I
I'm
think,
just looking at Carol, it's like, this is an E350 platform. So, yes, we knock on wood and say, this wonderful Ford van that we all love to not love. Well,
and then I think you've said a couple of times that Board of Selectmen wanted it to run this way because while ARPA,
ARPA,
yes, thank you, could only cover the bus, that this proposal covers the bus, the fuel, the labor. Matt, is that what's kind of meant in the language in here, and all associated costs of equipping the vehicle or take any other action
No,
right there
it's only
too?
for, this is only the bus.
Yes.
Next article covers.
So as part of Article 1,
That means if you have to put a.
it's in Article 1.
Yeah.
So you saw
Article 6
at the
is
bottom
still
of,
the bus
right, at the
itself.
yes.
bottom of Article 1, increase COA wages, those are drivers. Increase COA expenses, 750, that was the estimate of fuel.
Okay, so that answers my question, thank you.
That COA, is that 4,600, that's what is the bus driver?
My God.
Yeah, right.
Anybody else, comments or questions on Article 6, which is the bus itself for the 115? So the motion's been made and seconded. All right, let's have a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm going to abstain again. I'm just not comfortable with what the demand is for this vehicle, so I'm
Yeah,
going
I'm
to,
going to abstain as well.
So we have 2 abstentions, Sandy and Ryan. The ayes are Howard, Carol, Lynn, and Dick. Okay, so 4 yays and 2 abstentions, okay. All right, carry on.
Before
Okay.
we move on,
Yeah,
we've got a meeting planned just before the special town meeting, correct?
yeah, 6:30.
Would Patrice's involvement at that meeting help anyone with regard to their abstention, perhaps?
Yeah, what do you think? Would you like her to be there to
Yes,
answer some questions?
yes.
Can you contact her?
I
Jean?
will.
Ask her to be at school at 6:30 then?
Because this strikes me as something, whether folks really do listen to our recommendations or not, that is a 6-figure free cash request that a town meeting is often reluctant to pass, and yet a lot of work has gone into getting this request here. There may be a significant need for it, and there's the other potential funding source, which hasn't been something we've wanted to visit. But the only other source would be to bring this back around next May, correct? So that from the proponent's perspective, it's pretty important to try to get it passed this fall, correct?
Thank you, Howard. It's a good idea. All right, Sandy,
For being open on it.
carry on. Article 7, right?
Article 7. Article 7, changes to personnel compensation chart. I make a motion to recommend the town vote to change the personnel compensation chart by creating a Council on Aging bus driver, MS1, and a Council on Aging administrative assistant/outreach assistant at MS-2.
I second the motion.
Seconded by Lynn. So 2 weeks ago, the rough draft did not have the administrative assistant. And it just had the COA bus driver. So what's happened in the 2 weeks? Matt?
Somebody apparently caught this.
Yes.
Okay.
I was working on some of the compensation chart work, and I noticed that we didn't put it on at the annual town meeting in the spring.
Oh, I see, okay.
So this was the next available town meeting.
Okay. Any questions on that, anybody?
I do.
Let's go Carol first, yeah.
Yeah, what is the rate of an MS1? How much an hour is that?
I'm going to get that for you.
Okay.
What does MS stand for, Matt?
Miscellaneous.
Oh. And that administrative assistant, was that what you guys were talking about before?
Right.
Okay.
We already have this person.
So I tried to recreate the history here. So what, first of all, I'll say this, Mr. Chairman, the only way to fix something that's broken is to fix it. So that's what fall town meeting is often used for. We look at our operation, we fix things. Patrice's various staffing needs. So in fiscal '21, she had
It's arranged.
basically 3 part-time people.
Okay.
They were all MS1, but they were at different steps. There was a step 1, a step 5, and a step 2. In fiscal '22, the employee who was a step 1 no longer worked for us. And the employee that was hired at the step 2 step was quote-unquote bumped up because, based on performance and background and qualifications, was capable not only of doing more clerical work, but actually doing the outreach portion of a lot of Patrice's duties. So Patrice, when she became director, also took on all of the responsibilities of the outreach coordinator, which was the job she had before she became the director. So she kept her old job, added the directorship, and was doing both, but has looked for opportunities, somebody with VNA or other experience to be the one who picks up the phone and asks people questions. So in fiscal '21, the staff there was 30,000, call it 200, 30,193. Then we bumped that person up to full-time at MS2. So this is back in fiscal '22. That person was moved up. The grade was gone to MS2, and the job description was rewritten. What I was able to go back through my files, the job description was rewritten in March of '21. So just before fiscal '22, just a couple months before town meeting. So what it looks like we did is we did the job description, we put the money in the budget for the position, but didn't update the comp table with the assignment of the job. So that meant that went up to 41,218. Now this year, we're at 29,796. And we have recently added an MS1, step 1. Almost a part-time person. So that total is going to be probably less than 41, but more than 30. So we've been kind of up and down as the responsibilities have been reassigned to people based on their abilities.
So Carol, you had,
Well, I do. I mean, if we've got $4,600 for this bus driver, if it's an MS1, basically that bus is going to run, let's say it runs 50 weeks a year, not 52. That's less than 6 hours a week.
No, that's only a prorated portion for FY '23. That is not.
That's for the year we're in.
You have to buy the bus, so there was a projection made as to when the bus would go online.
So how much a year are we looking to pay a bus driver then?
I think the 4,600 is an even quarter.
Okay,
So call it 18.4.
okay, so let's see. We're gonna do
24 hours.
18.
Yeah.
So we got about 24 hours. Then of course we'll have to pick up the workers' comp, the tutor and all of that. Now where does that come out of? Does that come out of that 4,600 or does that come out of someplace else? You got a wage, but then you've got, a person that's doing that many hours, they get,
So just to, if I may interrupt, Mr. Chairman, so the contemplating here is a 19 and a 5. Okay, so that none of the benefits afforded to full-time employees would be afforded to these employees. Having a per diem is important because if that person driving 19 hours a week were to get sick or was unable to come to work, the per diem would be asked to work those hours. That's kind of important. If people are relying on you to get to medical appointments, there has to be a driver for the bus. So that's the way Patrice and I talked about structuring that.
so a part-time employee then would not be getting, well, obviously would be getting health insurance.
No.
Would they be getting, would they be getting vacation?
I think if you look at the personnel bylaw, regular part-time employees are entitled to a prorated number of vacation days. Am I correct?
This would be a limited part-time
Limited part-time.
because it's less than 20 hours. Regular part-time do get, I think that's between 20 and 29.
Is the center open 5 days a week? Or is it closed on Fridays?
I believe, again, COVID has really messed us up. We just had people gather whenever we could. I don't want to answer incorrectly.
Then I'm wondering if people have appointments at Milford Regional on the day that the center's not open, will the bus still run?
Yeah, we'll have to work around that, because not only does the bus have to run, but if somebody's coming to the center, then the center has to be open. If they need to use the restroom, yeah.
And it won't be going,
Patrice is on, so you can now,
it won't be going,
she made it.
Yeah, look at that.
Where she is, we can ask questions.
Patrice, can you hear us?
Just because her name is there doesn't mean her microphone is on.
Okay. That's half the battle.
Welcome to
Yeah, she's
Zoom.
still muted.
Did you contact her, Bob?
No idea.
Oh, you did?
The content is over, mic on.
Now she's on.
Patrice, can you hear us?
I can you hear me?
Yeah.
yes, I
We're wondering how many people in our town don't drive that are considered, might be served by the bus if it gets approved.
So I would say that we have a third of the population that are seniors. So we say that seniors are 60 and over because that's what the state says. So I would probably say we have probably a good 80 to 100 people.
And are these people who don't drive?
These are people who do not drive, correct?
So if the town meeting approved the new van, how many people do you think regularly would use it to go to the hospital or to the doctor and so on?
I know that a lot of the people over at Riddlebrook would be using it consistently because a lot of them do not drive in our senior housing. We also have people that are in senior housing, so to speak, over at Haywood Landing. And we have quite a bit of homebound seniors that will be utilizing it. So I think it's kind of a trial and error. I did put it out in our newsletter that's going out on Friday. It will be mailed to all of our 1,625 over 60 people. And we have asked them to please respond to if they need transportation. And we've already gotten probably about 40 people on our list. So I think that'll generate a little bit more of, hey, we're going to have a maybe possibly transportation, would you be able to use it or utilize it? And, of course, people that don't drive.
And then Patrice, could you just share with the group, you had said this morning that the services that, out of Southbridge, I think, but they don't even go to the Milford Hospital, is that right?
So CSM Elder Bus has never gone to Milford and will not go to Milford.
Okay.
I am on the board. We have tried for years and years to get them to go to that area because it's an area very sought out by our seniors for cardiology appointments, and of course they are being a father there. And they have a lot of follow-ups there because that's kind of their hospital of choice now that Harrington doesn't really admit you have to go to Southbridge. So a lot of people are going through Milford. And that being said, they follow up with whatever their appointments there.
Okay, questions, anybody?
Will the bus go only to Milford to a hospital, or will it go into Worcester to UMass or St. Bede's?
Yep, so once we have the bus established, and I think that seniors know they have their own transportation, independent of Elder Bus, as I said today, when you go on the Elder Bus, even if you wanted to visit the senior center for lunch at noontime, you're going to be picked up when they say you're going to be picked up, and you're going to be brought back to your home when they say you are. So you may be at the senior center for 4 or 5 hours, and you only need to be there for 2. Same with doctor's appointments. If we had our own transportation, and it's close and local by, we can just go back and forth because not multiplying several towns into the equation. So you're not going to have to sit at your doctor's appointment for 3 or 4 hours. And some of our seniors have to actually pay somebody to go with them because their service is you have to be ambulatory to go outside of your home to get on the bus. And if you're not ambulatory, they're not going to pick you up with a wheelchair at your door and run you out to the bus. You have to take somebody with you, and some of our seniors have to pay to have somebody go with them for a doctor's appointment. That could be an hour long, and they could be there for 3 or 4 or 5 hours waiting for transportation.
Matt, you had a comment?
I had another question, because I didn't know the answer. Are you always open on Friday, Patrice, or no?
Yes, we are.
No.
9 to noon?
We are open 9 to noon on Friday.
Ryan, you have a comment or question?
Hi, Patrice, Ryan Hogan. Do you kind of have, I know you don't certainly have it planned out, but some sort of sense of like what the schedule would be? I'm just trying to get a picture of what the service is going to be. Do you anticipate heading to Milford daily? Would it be a couple times a week, and the seniors would then try to organize their appointments on particular days, and then the other trips, would the trips to the grocery store be planned, or would just be taking people back and forth to the senior center? Is there any kind of game plan? I know it's early in the process, but.
Yeah, so the schedule would be as follows. Medical appointments would always have first priority. Prescription and food would have second priority. Senior center nutrition and exercise programs would have priority after those 2 other needs were met. And that being said, if we had a month to be able to schedule people, if they knew it was coming, most people that are going to Milford, the service is going on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis, maybe quarterly. We would have a schedule to be able to do that, and if that was achieved first, then we would make a schedule to be able to get prescriptions and food shopping and other things in. So it's kind of be a little bit of, work. We have the spreadsheets where we're taking phone calls from people. We certainly have a lot of letters from people, and we're documenting all of that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, so right now we're trying to get everybody their COVID vaccines. Moderna is running very short, and it's only in very small areas in the Blackstone Valley area. I have 5 seniors right now that can't drive to Worcester or Milford. They just couldn't do it. They could go to Walmart, maybe, or Hannaford, but they don't have it available. Another reason why it would have been really nice to be able to have a bus to bring everybody to one appointment in a city to be able to get this vaccine, and our local pharmacy does not have it, so I can't even host a clinic.
Ryan, anything else? Follow up?
Can I move to Article 7? Would that be okay?
Well, Howard, you had suggested that she come to our meeting early. Do we still need her to do that if she's here tonight?
I already voted in favor.
Okay.
So that's really, I asked of the two that abstained, you know, I didn't know if there was something that, obviously, we're printing out a flyer that'll have we gotten to a point where we do a vote, 6-0 versus 4-0 and
It
2
will be
abstentions?
included in the flyer.
Based on the vote tonight,
Correct.
correct? So even though day of, you have a meeting and 1 or 2 people say, oh, I'm now in favor, that'll be harder to communicate that night to the town,
The
correct?
moderator could always ask if the finance committee has,
Modified their
Correct.
vote. Okay, all right.
or the town meeting may ask why they
Sure,
abstained.
right.
And they may at that point volunteer that they may have changed.
Do you guys need any more information from her at this point?
Yes.
Sandy, go ahead.
Yes. Can you define who qualifies to ride on the bus?
So anybody that would be 60 years or older that is disabled would be eligible to ride the bus. That is the standard kind of for the state. That's how all of the other senior centers in the area are doing it. That is how CSM Elder Bus currently controls all of their rides. If you're a senior who's riding, then you're not just going to be able to come to the senior center on the bus because you don't want to drive in the rain. But if you're a senior who does not drive, of course, you would be eligible for that. And if you were a senior who does drive and you were going to an appointment that required medical intervention and you weren't able to drive after that appointment, such as an eye dilation or maybe radiation, dialysis, or chemo where you were too weak to drive, we would also be able to do that.
Patrice, Carol Godwinski said they would have to be disabled. Just because a person can't drive doesn't mean they're disabled.
No. 60 years old or disabled.
Oh, okay, or. Okay. All right, I missed or. I'm disabled in my hearing.
Sorry, my internet isn't the best out here in the country, so.
I
No, it's me.
Yeah, 60
Sorry.
seems very young.
It's the new 30.
Yeah, so that just seems like a lot of people would qualify.
Any other
That's the
questions?
point,
Drive.
right? That's really the point. That's where she opened it.
Yeah.
A third of town residents are 60
Yeah.
and more. The percentage is increasing rather than decreasing. The town is getting older, correct?
The country is getting older. The country.
2035 will literally be that
Right,
age.
sure, yeah.
What was that, Patrice?
In 2030, 1 in 5 residents in this country will be that age.
60's not.
No, 60 is.
It's the new 30.
Well,
Yeah, so-
ask a 20-year-old that question.
Yeah.
Ask our kids.
Yeah, so, 60's old. 60 gets to where people might need the bus.
Any more questions for Patrice, anybody?
I still have a question on Article
Okay, go ahead.
7. I'm sorry,
Speak to?
yes, I
Okay.
think so. Matt tried to go through the COA administrative assistant, outreach assistant, and to be bluntly honest, he lost me in all the, it sounded like you had some part-time and now are going to a full-time assistant. Could you possibly walk us through that?
Okay, so what happened was in 2021, I had one of my clerk retired. She was a 19-hour-week position. That was my only employee besides my part-time position, which was Jennifer. And she came in right before the pandemic in 2019. After the pandemic and such, Sandy was planning on going part-time in 2021 and took a role as her mother's caretaker. So she retired altogether. So it's been Jennifer and I for, what year are we in? I get so confused with COVID because I feel like I lost 2 years. So Jennifer went to a 30-hour-week position to cover Sandy and outreach assistants because I'm the director and I do all of the outreach casework and we have been inundated. So that's how she ended up going to 30 hours a week. We also extended the hours at the senior center for the need that we had with seniors coming back to the center after the pandemic. That being said, I never replaced my part-time clerk, so I waited a year to do that. We just did it this year because we are so full, we actually had to add on the other person. So I always have those 2 employees. So it seems like we've added somebody new. All we did was add a little bit more hours to Jennifer so that she could assist with the outreach. And then we have a part-time person now replacing Jennifer because I had somebody retire.
So let me see if I can,
Does that make sense?
I think so. Let me see if I got it. So you had Sandy full-time and Jennifer part-time. Sandy retired, you moved Jennifer to full-time, and now you're just replacing the part-time position you had.
Correct.
Okay.
Although we gave Jennifer an 11 additional hours a week to be able to assist with the outreach because I'm only one person.
Right.
And we became inundated during COVID and after COVID. We have a lot of seniors at this point who wouldn't like to go to a nursing home or assisted living because of what happened during COVID. We have a lot of people that can't afford to make that transition, and we have a lot of elderly population in town that has remained in their homes with no services. And right now, I have probably 40 people on a waiting list just to get a home health aide. There is nobody working in senior services.
Okay. Thank you very much, Patrice.
Anybody else questions for Patrice while we have her? Okay, Patrice, thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrice.
Thank you.
Appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, did we vote on Article 7 yet or not?
That's it?
Okay.
I'm sorry. Do we want to go back to Article 6 and revote? I would now be in favor of the motion if you want to do that. If not,
I make a motion that we go back and vote again on Article 6.
Okay, I'm just thinking,
So it is correct parliamentarily to do that.
but
The
that's,
prevailing side, and Howard was on the prevailing side, makes a motion to reconsider the vote. It sounds negative, but it really is just, let's vote again on that.
yeah, somehow I thought the person who made the motion had to,
No, that's
Okay.
that is a more narrow interpretation of Robert's rules and it's necessary.
we're a broad interpretation, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded to
Reconsider.
reconsider.
So we have to vote to reconsider.
Yeah, we have to vote to reconsider. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So we will re-vote again on Article 6. So Sandy, why don't you make the motion again for Article 6 and then Lynn?
Okay. For Article 6, the Council on Aging bus, I make a motion to recommend that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $115,000 for the purpose of funding the purchase of a Council on Aging bus and all associated costs of equipping the vehicle.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries
Sandy, is
unanimously.
that an aye? That's
I'm an aye.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you for reaching out, Patrice.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
We didn't vote on Article 7 yet, though, did we?
No.
Okay.
We have a motion and second.
Yeah, okay. Any more discussion on Article 7, anybody? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Sandy?
Okay,
Article
Article 8, South Street drainage improvements. I make a motion that the town vote to
Recommend.
I make a motion to recommend that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $45,000 to hire an engineer to design drainage improvements through South Street.
I second the motion.
Okay. Seconded by Lynn. Any discussion? That's the same as we had 2 weeks ago when we talked about this. Any questions, anybody? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, Sandy?
Article 9, Route 16 sidewalk. I make a motion to recommend the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $383,000 to amend Article 9, fiscal year 2009 to fiscal year 2014 capital improvement plan of annual town meeting, May 5, 2008, for the construction of a new sidewalk, drainage improvements, and all associated costs on Route 16.
I second the motion.
Okay, seconded by Lynn. You might recall our discussion of this 2 weeks ago. Any further questions or comments on this, anybody?
I do.
Okay, Ryan, go ahead.
Maybe, I don't know if this should go to Dick or Matt. Has the Capital Committee talked about this article at all and whether they're in favor of this over other projects?
I don't think it came up, no, this has been kind of floating around for a while though, right?
Well,
Matt, why don't you fill in the back?
I'll do the best I can, Mr. Chairman, to tell the history of it. This is a really old capital article that was approved by town meeting 14 years ago, a really long time ago. And at the time, the town engineer contemplated that this would be a fairly simple, pour sidewalk, because then the folks down there want it, and walk away. And with the passage of time, and when he began working on it, because he was a qualified engineer, he realized this is not going to be a simple project at all. That because of the location of the pole, the way the road meanders through the right-of-way in that part of Douglas, and really significant stormwater catch basins, if you're familiar with that street intersection, that they're big enough for a small child to fall into, right? You have to be at the right angle and have a little bit of push for some water, but you would go if you were 3 years old. That it wasn't just a willy-nilly, just make a sidewalk and go away. So the neighbors petitioned the town for the project to go forward, right? So we've investigated the benefit of Stantec, who's our engineer for most of our roadway projects, and they did our pavement improvement and sidewalk improvement studies to go out there and truly arrive at an engineered, like, let's go put this out to bid, bring it up to that point. When they did that and investigated the status of the stormwater and how much it would cost to work our way along on Route 16, this is the cost that has arisen from it. As I've said in other contexts, our view is that town meeting is the people's assembly. It is their right to bring things to town meeting for a vote. And it is our job here at town meeting to enable people to have access to their institutions that way by giving them the engineering, writing the motions, putting things together. And when it's arising from taxpayers, I would respectfully ask that we not be put on the spot to tell you what we think of it. This is for the people of the town to decide whether you want to spend your money in this particular fashion, whether you want to listen to your neighbors' recommendations. We serve all the people here, so we don't really want to get involved in something that's very important to some folks.
But when town meeting approved it, I recall, wasn't it 40 or 50 grand, something in that regard?
56 is the number that
Wasn't
sticks
this-
in my head. It may have been less.
Okay. But no committee has, part of my concern is nobody's evaluated whether this project is more significant than other, we have many, many roads to repair, we have other projects in town, and so my understanding is nobody has evaluated that as more important than others, other than the town citizens, and I guess the selectmen who put it on the warrant. Would that be correct? Okay, thank you.
I know it's up to the town meeting to decide, if they want it, but I think it's up to the finance committee to make a recommendation on whether or not we think the town should spend the money on it.
Right, you are town meeting.
Right, so-
You're appointed by the moderator,
Right,
so.
so, I just think, I agree with Ryan. I mean, $383,000 is a lot of money. We've got the highway department sitting in a trailer, because, they can't breathe the air in the highway department and they have health issues. The $383,000, we could have a permanent office built there. Not that we want to, we want to do something a little more than that, but I just think that's an awful lot of money for a sidewalk. And we don't even have a sidewalk going to the school down on Davis Street. So to spend that kind of money for a sidewalk over there, I think is, I think when this came up, no one thought it would be that kind of money. I actually, there's no way I could vote for this kind of money for a sidewalk.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? Howard?
Matthew, you just said the neighbors petitioned the town in 2008 or again in 2022?
I think our first contact may have been 2021.
Okay, but it's a re-request.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Was it?
It was one of those, whatever happened to that money
Yes,
at town
that's
meeting?
what it
Yeah,
was.
okay.
Whatever happened to,
Got it.
yes, yeah.
Got it.
But even then, when they said whatever happened to, they didn't have an idea of that price.
I don't think anybody knew that was going to
Nobody
be
knew
outcome.
that
That's a fair
price tag.
statement, yeah.
Which is significant.
So Matt, I haven't been out there for a while, but if nothing is done at all and it just stays as it is it unsafe for that 3-year-old?
Well, should your kid be playing?
Well, there's no sidewalk there.
There's no sidewalks.
It's a pretty busy road for a 3-year-old to be on, so that would be unsafe.
I don't think it's a stretch to characterize that as not a safe place to walk with your family
Okay.
with the traffic flows that are there if there's no sidewalk.
Okay, any more discussion?
The only other comment I would make, I looked at it in the last couple of days using the second skeleton as a designation.
Yeah.
But it's already caused one major accident, by the way.
Well, anyway,
I was
yeah.
looking at the skeleton.
So, I'm definitely a pro-sidewalk person. But this stretch, with all respect to the folks in whatever that hill is, not the street that goes way up, but the second one that's at the top that is across from the
Yeah,
stick builds or whatever. After that sidewalk, if you build this, you don't connect again for, I'll bet, a mile until you get down to the ice cream cone place and
Yes,
stuff.
exactly.
This isn't a connector that's connecting one section of town with 1,000 homes or 1,000 residents to another section with 2,200, or one of 3 links needed to finish off a major event. This is a sidewalk to a single neighborhood, with all respect to that neighborhood, with all respect to that neighborhood.
Exactly.
But it doesn't have a stepping stone. It's one of the longest stretches in the center of town, if you will, before you get to the next area to build. That's at least the
Because when you
observation
start
I
going
made.
down,
It just didn't, it
No
doesn't get
sidewalk
you
there
to
either.
something you connect something else to easily enough to stretch across town. And that was, for me, it wasn't, I agree with Carol, for me, it wasn't close to begin with, but if I looked at it and I said, oh, I can see it connects hundreds and, thousands in 2 separate sections of our community, I'd say, that's interesting. It's the last piece, but I didn't see it as that at all.
Gene, do you know, would it be possible, not right now, but in the next week or so, to bring up the town meeting where this first came up 15 years ago and to see
Actually-
what the motion was at the town meting?
It was part of a larger article.
And what the
A
amount
capital
was?
article. I can get that.
Would you? Okay.
like it is best.
Yeah.
If it's on paper, she has it.
So it's cost benefit analysis.
Yeah, I looked at that section too when I drove by on purpose, because I could see where the sidewalk ends, and then there's Martin Road, and then that piece, and then going down, and it's quite a ways till you get to the sidewalk again, and
And then if you thought about now, would I like to walk downtown on that sidewalk, but I gotta walk uphill to come home? Maybe not such the best sidewalk to walk on.
I assume it was originally proposed when kids up the hill were 8 or 6 or 9,
Right.
and they would have maybe walked down the hill and into the community, and they'd be 9, they'd be able to walk back up that hill.
Well, you got a point there, I agree.
But I assume it was
Are you talking about
proposed,
the sidewalk on Sunset? That
is
real-
it Sunset that goes up?
This one is Franklin, so it's the next.
But doesn't it connect Franklin and then up to Sunset? Oh, I thought it did both.
I'm not so sure it does. I think it goes from the terminus in front of the skeleton
Yeah,
to
Franklin, it
That was
stops.
it?
Franklin. I didn't see the plan.
Well,
Even if it goes to Sunset,
I
right,
guess
is your
it's-
analysis any different?
What year was that, Gene?
No, but I
Yeah.
presumed that was where the proposal would come from, because Franklin
There's
doesn't get
119
any
registered
benefit,
voters at town meeting.
Right.
right? Sunset at least gets 15 houses.
119 registered voters, May 5th, 2008,
Yeah.
and it was for 60,791.
Really wish it would say.
So 2008, it was 60,000.
Right.
So here we are,
12 years.
14 years.
later.
yeah, to 300 and change. So,
It's 383,000.
Yeah.
That's, you know.
that's a bit. Any more discussion on the motion? So the motion is to recommend this, okay? It's been made and seconded. So, anybody else comment? So all in favor of recommending, say aye. All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Unanimous.
6-0,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
60 against it.
And the grounds would be, it's
Cost.
just too expensive for,
Cost for what you're getting.
Cost benefit.
Yeah.
It's cost benefit.
so if, okay, so let's carry on. Sandy?
Okay. Article 10, to amend zoning bylaw, section 10 definitions. I make a motion to recommend the town vote to amend section 10 of the Douglas zoning bylaws as printed in the warrant.
I second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Lynn.
Section
This was the building height,
Yes.
average grade, grade at 11,
Right.
within 5 feet of the structure. We talked about this last
Yeah.
time. Any questions on that? Everybody remember? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
I'm going to abstain. I don't believe it's financial in nature.
Okay, so Ryan abstains. Motion carries. Okay, Sandy.
Article 11, adopt zoning bylaw, section 6.8, solar bylaw. I make a motion to recommend the town vote to adopt section 6.8 of the Douglas zoning bylaws as printed in the warrant.
I second the motion.
Okay, Lynn seconds. You might recall 2 weeks ago, this was,
Are you going to make it for the last motions to second them?
I am.
All right, need coffee? All right, all right, all
I
right.
need dinner, Howard. I'm starving.
everybody recall the discussion we had of this 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
Any further questions or comments?
No.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Did you want to abstain?
No, I vote aye on that one. Thank you.
All right. Sandra?
Article 12, zoning bylaw removal, section 6.1. I make a motion to recommend that the town vote to remove in its entirety section 6.1, earth removal of the Douglas zoning bylaws as printed in the warrant.
I second the motion.
Okay, Lynn seconds. Can you recall this from 2 weeks ago, all the strike-throughs and the rough draft? Any comments or questions on that, anybody?
Do we know? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, Carol, go ahead.
I don't see any reason why they've taken it off of the zoning bylaw and made a regular bylaw. It hasn't been explained to the point where I think there's any reason for it, and I don't like it, and I'm voting against.
What didn't you like specifically?
It's always been a zoning bylaw. Now they decide they're gonna make it a regular bylaw. Why? It didn't make any sense. Oh, it would be work better. No, I don't know. You know what, I don't like them taking people's rights away. And this is what I feel, changing this is taking some rights away, and so I'm against it.
How does it take rights away, though?
Well, there are people who are already doing things, they have pre-existing non-conforming uses, and then when under zoning, well, if you take away the pre-existing non-conforming use, you're taking someone's rights away. You're taking it, going into a regular bylaw, so they don't have a pre-existing non-conforming use under zoning. So I see no reason to leave it just the way it was.
Matt, can you speak to that a little bit? The zoning versus the general bylaw and just how that affects Carol's concerns. 'Cause you're a little,
I don't know that I have a good answer.
okay.
Okay? I can tell you where it originates from, is the feeling was, and I think it was shared by quite a few people, as we worked our way through a very difficult case that was present, that the earth removal permit was flawed in two ways. The provisions in the zoning code were flawed in two ways. One way, the limit on the amount of soil that could be disturbed and taken off-site was too low. So technically, if you were removing more than 300 yards from a site, you would have to go and get a permit, an earth removal permit from the planning board, and subject yourself to whatever hearing schedules and all the rest of it. 300 yards is not a lot of material, so if you dig a foundation for a home and cut out a swimming pool and maybe put any other digging you're going to do for your septic, it's over 1,000 yards. So that was flawed, and the trigger was set unnecessarily sensitive. But then there was an exception that you could drive a truck through, which was you could remove as much soil as you needed to incidental to home construction. Well, clever lawyers were saying, well, that means I could buy a 50-acre lot, put a house on the corner and say, I want a view of the river, and take the whole mountain out and not need an earth removal permit. And it sounds absurd, but the fact of the matter is the exception swallowed the rule. So that needed to be addressed in order to allow abutters to have a vehicle to assert that there needed to be some control over the process through the permitting process. Carol's point is very nuanced, and I guess I don't have an answer because I hopefully think I understand what she's saying, that so-called grandfathered pre-existing non-conforming uses are allowed because the rule came into effect after someone began to use those rights in their property. And that's not, a not pre-existing non-conforming use can continue so as long as it is not expanded beyond certain thresholds in the code. If you make it into a general bylaw, I guess one line of reasoning would be that your pre-existing non-conforming rights go to zoning and don't go to the general bylaw, so that if you're doing something that you didn't need a permit for before, now you would need a permit. But it doesn't extinguish their ability to use the property for that. They would simply have to go to get a permit.
Exactly. They'd have to go get a permit. So now they're no longer pre-existing non-conforming use. The other thing is, these two things that you talked about, why couldn't they have been couldn't have put in the zoning bylaw? Why did they have to go to a whole new throw of that? You couldn't amend the zoning bylaw to bring it to 1,000? Yes, you could. And you couldn't amend it to say, get rid of that little thing about existing things. So, I mean, to have to do this whole thing because of two little things, to me, there's something wrong with that.
Well, it's not little, because that particular case was actually egregious, right? So we had
Okay,
over
but-
200,000 yards of material.
So you can change the bylaw here.
I'm not, again, I'm not the author, I'm not advocating for this particular, one way or the other. I want to explain how it got to be in front of you, and that's the reason. I think when Land Use Council recommended the general bylaw format, the notion was that would take enforcement from the planning board, which doesn't really have staff or an extensive record of being an enforcement agency in the town. And Mr. Chairman, you were on the planning board, I think you know what I'm getting at. You don't have a planning board agent like you have a Conservation Commission agent, whose job it is to enforce the conditions put on permits and subdivision.
Right. I mean, Matt, whatever his name is.
But he's not an enforcement agent. Moving it to a general bylaw makes the select board the issuer of the permit. Now, everybody has their own bias. This one thing I will advocate about. Personally, I do not have any comfort level with planning boards regulating business, day-to-day operations. Most of those business operations that are regulated by local government are regulated by the select board. So the sale of alcohol, the sale of prepared foods, hours of operation. It's a smaller board, it meets more frequently, and you can be brought forward for show cause and the rules enforced, so the permit could actually be withdrawn. That is where Land Council was coming from in their recommendation of switching it from a general, from a zoning bylaw to a general bylaw.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that. So then, why couldn't it be in the zoning bylaw that the selectman of the person who gives the permit? Before it used to be the ZBA, then it was changed over to the planning board. So there's no reason why it couldn't be changed to the selectmen. So we're talking about 3 little changes to the zoning bylaw instead of throwing the whole zoning bylaw out and starting over.
So Carol, what I don't understand is if you're pre-existing non-conforming
Right.
and you're not changing anything,
He said you'd have to get a permit, and he's right.
but let's say you
Right.
had something you were pre-existing non-conforming, and you're not doing anything,
Well, how do you know that I'm doing anything?
but I'm talking hypothetically.
Well,
You're not expanding the footprint, you're not doing anything, so how would this change affect you if
because
you're
now
not changing
You would
anything?
have to have a permit to remove gravel, okay? What it is if you're a pre-existing non-conforming use removing gravel, you can continue to dig in the area where you're doing it, okay? And remove it, truck it off site and everything.
Okay.
If this goes to a zoning bylaw, you have to get a permit. Now you have to go through the permit.
General
There's a nuance, though, Mr. Chairman, there is actually a nuance in the question you asked. Pre-existing non-conforming use is discontinued for a certain period of time, it's deemed abandoned. So this gets,
okay.
right, we should start peeling away the onion. So you would have to actually continuously be having some form of activity.
And I would think that most of these gravel pits that are running are continuous, so,
Yeah, I would think
I mean,
so.
that's new. They're not, if it's no longer running, it's probably because there's no more gravel left there. So you wouldn't have to worry about that, but I just can't see where a few changes could have been made to the zoning bylaw, but instead we're going to throw the whole thing out and we're going to do everything completely different, and I'm opposed to that.
But even a zoning bylaw limits your freedom. You talk about, I'm free to do what I want, but the whole purpose behind zoning
Right. but-
is you don't have
But
unlimited
if-
freedom.
But if you have a pre-existing non-conforming use, then you don't have to go and spend thousands of dollars every time you turn around for permits to the town. And believe me, and then put up $100,000, $200,000 bonds and everything else if you're a pre-existing non-conforming use.
Well, I'm not sure about that part. My point is, whenever you have zoning, and all our towns do, maybe they don't in Vermont, but you're admitting the minute you have zoning, that you don't have unlimited freedom to do what you want with your property.
Right.
I can't put a Jiffy Lube in my backyard, it's not allowed.
I agree, but why would you have to change it? This is why I want to know, why must this be changed? And it doesn't have to be changed. It could have been easily amended, the zoning bylaw that's there right now.
What's the difference between the current zoning bylaw with your 3 amendments and the amended bylaw?
It's under a regular bylaw instead of a zoning bylaw, and
But what's the difference in
pre-existing-
practical?
The pre-existing uses would be eliminated.
But you
They
said
would have
that
to go for a permit.
right, but you said that you'd be okay if the zoning bylaw had the 3 amendments.
Right.
The 3rd amendment was the one that said anything had to run through for permitting through the Board of
No,
Selectmen.
no, no. It said, no, what that was, they would still have to go for an evidently there's something that says that you don't have to have a permit if it's part of construction to remove the dirt. I don't know, where exactly in the zoning bylaw is that?
Oh, it's in it's in section 9, it's in the earth
Okay.
removal permit section.
So you just change that. And that's how they, evidently someone has gotten around it, because they say, oh, we're doing construction here, we don't have to do this. So you just eliminate that, cross that out.
All right. Any more comments or questions on that?
Yeah, put on the couch.
What's that?
I think Bob's
You gotta
talking to
mute
his
yourself,
dog.
Bob, when you're yelling at the dog.
Who was on the couch?
Bob Stallman's dog. Yeah, no kidding. Huh?
Dick,
There was a dog.
Okay,
Dick, I have two quick
okay,
questions.
go ahead.
So under the Board of Selectmen, who is the enforcing agent? Is the building inspector the enforcing agent?
So if you noticed a condition, so the building official, the zoning official, could note that something's occurring and bring it for show cause.
Okay. Do we know how the planning board voted? Did they recommend this? Do we know?
They, I don't believe, have finalized their opinion on this. I don't think I'm over my skis to say I think they are opposed to it, based on the dialogue in the last meeting, but I think they have scheduled a final recommendation on this after tonight. I think it's Thursday next week.
Who enforces the zoning bylaws?
Zoning official.
Zoning official, who is the building inspector? Okay, so who's going to enforce the bylaws now if it goes over through the selectmen?
What's it say in the draft general bylaw? I think they're designee.
Oh,
The Board of Selectmen's does.
okay. And who's the designee going to be? Are we going to find, who are you going to send
You're
over?
changing who would regulate it, who would enforce it. That's really the difference, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it would be, the selectmen would be giving out the permits.
So,
Versus the.
Mr. Chairman, if I would, I'm going to try to answer Carol's questions one at a time,
Okay,
Oh, I have plenty.
because you would be an excellent cross-examiner, you're not even letting the witness answer.
Would have told you that, that's for sure.
So in the general bylaw, this is in your copy of the warrant, page 21 of 22, section 15. Such fines may be imposed by the board or its designated agent in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 21D. The imposition of fines shall not in any manner constitute a waiver or any other remedy the board may have in the enforcement of the bylaw. So that's the enforcement provision. The board would designate who's going to enforce it.
So we have some employees running around here, nothing to do that can enforce these things, right?
No, I mean, really, who would it be? It'd be the zoning official. The zoning official's going there to do inspections anyway.
Right, and that's who it is now too. So everything would change.
all right, are we ready to move on with the vote, everybody? Or do we have more comments or questions? Ryan, you got another one?
I don't. Mr. Chairman, I would recommend maybe we hold off on voting on this until we hear what the planning board votes, and maybe ask Matt to come before our meeting and talk about this. I'm not ready to make a decision myself at this point.
He'd be here tonight, but he's out sick today and tomorrow.
Yeah, I
So
don't think
we
we
would
have.
bring this up again at our meeting before the town meeting itself, then.
That would be my recommendation, yes.
Okay, anybody want to speak to that?
Does it have,
So Sandy moved and Lynn seconded, so we have an active motion on the floor, and Ryan's suggesting we table it
table it?
until the night of the town meeting.
Yes, I'd like to hear how the planning board votes before I make a decision. That they have way more expertise in this area than I do.
So we voted on the other thing, and then we just, we did wait. I guess I'm a little confused now. When we did 2 that abstained, and we had 4 that voted for it, we wouldn't have changed, we would not have changed our mind. If we hadn't gone and re-voted, that would have been what would have gone in the,
Right.
Correct.
in there. Okay.
Correct.
So, I mean, if you're very opposed to this, would it have more punch to have it published that certain people on the finance committee are opposed, rather than?
I think it would.
If that's what I'm wondering,
That's
by not voting now, which is a good point, does it have less
Well, it won't go out on the warrant with the board is.
Right, so what's your thought?
I don't know. I'm willing to vote tonight, and I'm willing to vote no, and I don't know how everybody else wants to vote, but I really just don't think that they should go changing these things around and affect, when there's really no reason for it. It could have very easily been amended, the zoning bylaw could have been amended, and it could have been amended that the selectmen would be the people who gave the permit. They could have increased it to the 1,000 yards. They could have said no, scratched out the part that said if it had to do with construction, and that could have been done that way. So I don't think that it should have gone off to change the whole shebang.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we should take an informal poll on who has an opinion. Maybe I'm the only one who doesn't have an opinion.
There is no informal poll without a second to your motion. You've made a motion and there's no second at the moment.
So we have the regular motion and it's been seconded, so.
Right, but Ryan has effectively made a motion to table the vote, and there's been no second.
I really, okay. It wasn't a motion, it was a suggestion. I'm just trying to move on, whatever the.
So Carol, is your big concern that the enforcement moves from ZBA to the selectmen?
No, my big concern is it's going from a zoning bylaw
Okay.
to a regular bylaw.
And why is that bad again?
Because the fact that people who have a pre-existing non-conforming use already will have to go now and get permits.
So,
Some people might be in favor of that, right? And some people might be opposed to it.
That's right,
Right.
that's right. But the thing is that, there are a lot of people around who have pre-existing non-conforming uses on their property, okay? But you know how it is? It's the camel's nose under the tent. They get you today, but tomorrow they get you.
Carol, give me a smaller example. Give me the camel's full nose in the
Well,
tent.
people who have undersized lots, they want to add on to them and stuff. They want to add a couple of bedrooms or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of people, we have a 2-acre minimum lot size. There are a lot of people here prior to, I forget when it was, the 1980s, when it was minimum was 1 acre.
And you want that to remain unregulated versus this looks to regulate that.
I think if someone had something going before the town came in and put laws on it, that they should be allowed to continue.
Well, that goes to Matt's point, though, that these end up having a sunset period to them. Somebody doing that 43 years ago that started to build on to their home and didn't do anything for 40 years and then says, oh, I think I'll complete that. I put up 3 boards 43 years ago, really doesn't have a continuous effort at their pre-existing non-conforming use project.
Okay, so I guess that's what you're saying. If you're on a 1-acre lot and you decide you want to put on a family room in a 2-car garage, you shouldn't be able to do that because you didn't do it for 40 years.
But you can't. Well, let's just be clear about what our bylaw says. You cannot do that without a permit right now.
Yeah.
If you're on a pre-existing non-conforming lot and you want to
Right.
expand the footprint of your building,
Right.
you must go through zoning.
But
Unless you started it
But the-
before.
No, and I don't even know-
continuously going on,
Yeah, I mean, right. But
right? That's what we're talking about.
you would still have to have a valid building permit that you kept open.
Right.
And there's a process for
Right.
keeping it open. Yeah.
Right, right. Carol, is that accurate from your perception? That the
It is,
gravel
but I
company
think that
had
most-
32 years ago, they pulled a permit to get started on the project. And they're still using that permit.
that's right.
But it was issued a long, long time ago.
There wasn't a permit.
Well, something was issued.
No, I think at the time Carol's talking about, no, there were no
Fair
residential.
enough, okay,
Pre-existing
then that's that,
non-conforming use.
okay, all right. So, does
And I
anyone
don't
else?
think they've ever done anything. It's been a problem that they would not have done through permits, except that they didn't have to, go for a permit, planning board, oh, well, no, we need a little more information. That's sort of taking out 3 more weeks. Oh, forgot to cross the T over here. That'll be another 6 weeks before we can get you something on it. In the meanwhile, give us another $10,000 and then a $50,000 or $100,000 bond.
And this proposal takes it away from the planning board, though.
The planning board doesn't have it right now on them.
Yeah, they do.
There's the difference.
Well, they hold the public hearing on behalf of zoning, though.
But if it's pre-existing non-conforming use, they don't. There's the difference.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I keep thinking about is if you're pre-existing non-conforming and you stay within the original footprint of what you're
That's
doing,
right.
you don't have any problems.
Well, you will with this. If it goes over to this, you will.
If you go beyond the footprint.
No. It's not going beyond the footprint. Not according to what he just said. You said they have to get a permit. That's what you said.
So if you're not going to increase the footprint of where you're digging, if that's the business we're talking about, then your pre-existing non-conforming use, so long as it is continuous, I think it would be very difficult for anybody to dislodge under zoning. That same business, if it were a general bylaw, I don't know what exception you would plead. I suppose that a skilled attorney would say, well, I still have my pre-existing non-conforming, you can't change that now, right? A skilled attorney would make that argument, I'm sure it would be litigated. But just asking me what category it's in, well, no, now it's in the general bylaw.
Exactly.
So I don't think you can use zoning terms to exempt yourself from a general bylaws application. So that's, I agree with Carol on that, but where it would be different is if you, there's one stuck leg here. If you had a pit and it was 100 by 100 and there was pre-existing non-conforming, and you decided one day to ask for forgiveness, not for permission, and you were going to make it 200 by 200,
That's right. I
you would be
agree with you.
violating
I
zoning.
agree with you.
But you could do it if you had the approval of the zoning board through the zoning process.
You'd have to get permits.
Yeah.
Exactly. You cannot go beyond the limit of where you were working. I agree with you 100%.
Are we ready to vote or not? We want to keep talking about this.
Does anyone want to second what Brian may or may not want to do?
I was just trying to avoid the Finance Committee having 3 or 4 abstentions and 1 or 2 people voting on the issue. If people are comfortable voting, I'm happy to abstain, and obviously the majority would rule.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the motion? So the motion is, as Sandy said, we recommend the town move to change the earth removal bylaw, and it basically takes it out of the zoning and into the general bylaws. Is that right, Matt? That's the flavor of the motion,
You've
right?
got 2 articles, that's
Yeah,
what they
we're on
accomplish.
12 still, correct?
Oh, yeah, 12, okay, sorry. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay.
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 So we got 2 ayes, 2 nays. Are you abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
And 2
That's
abstentions.
as muddy as you can get, right?
It's kind of what I was trying to
You
avoid.
know what, that's actually not bad. Let the town decide.
That's okay, yeah.
Right?
I wish the Supreme Court would have 2 to 2 to 2 votes. Much more interesting when they do that.
All right, Sandy.
Okay. Article 13, adopt general bylaw as new Article 12, earth removal. I make a motion to recommend the town vote to adopt Article 12 of the Douglas general bylaws as printed in the warrant.
I second it.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. So if you guys recall our discussion,
Isn't this just the sister?
Yes.
It's the second piece of it.
yeah,
Was that Article 12 or Article 13?
Yeah.
That was 13.
13,
Did I say 12?
I think so.
But
Did
it
you
I
says,
think you guys skipped 11. Did you talk about solar?
yeah,
We did, it was passed
That was so
easily.
fast, I
that
didn't
went right
notice.
through.
Right.
No discussion.
See that in efficiency?
Yeah.
So this is 13. We're voting on
Right.
13.
which is the general bylaw of earth removal, right?
Well, it's the,
Creating the general bylaw,
Hey,
yes.
what if they voted, 13 went through, or 12 went through and we removed it, and then
I think it's
13
funny.
did go through and we had
one's,
none?
one's 2/3 and one's majority.
Matt may quit.
Ordered the way it is.
Right,
We shall see, Sandy.
right. We
All
talked.
right, so the motion's been made and seconded. Any questions or comments on Article 13? It's sort of the mirror of the prior discussion, right? All right, all in favor, say aye.
It's the supplement,
No.
it's actually not the mirror.
Okay,
Be careful.
yeah,
Right?
gotcha.
What's that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Abstain?
Abstain.
Okay. 2, 2, and 2. All right, Matt, you have anything for us? Just updates on stuff, or how our projects are going? Any movement on below the Mumford River Dam there by the Shell station? Is that
So-
any change from when you last reported?
Yeah, so we've been busy, right? So I'll try to bullet point this really quickly for you. We've been in front of the Department of Public Utilities for full-blown hearing for the extension of natural gas service into the town of Douglas by Eversource. The comment period has been extended by DPU by 1 week on the request of the Attorney General's office. And then we met with the Attorney General's office again on Friday to clarify some of the points in the town's testimony. When the record was taken by the hearing officer, no intervener was qualified other than the Attorney General. So there was testimony by certain groups that day about the extension of natural gas pipelines, which you may be able to rather predictably assume what their position was. They were all disqualified, so they were not allowed to intervene, and their testimony was basically ruled out of order because it was not on point to the application. So the only evidence on the record is what the town has put in, and Eversource, and the project proponent, CRG. And the only intervener who could alter the facts on the record would be the Attorney General's office. We engaged in a fairly interesting repartee on Friday over various ways to look at the universe. I'll just say what the town's position is that these warehouses get built. If it's not built in Douglas, it'll be built in Uxbridge. If it's not built in Uxbridge, it'll be built in Charlton. So really, this case is only about one thing, and that's whether or not Douglas will be given the same fair opportunity to develop its economy and its tax base that Uxbridge and Sutton and everybody else has had. And I really truly believe that. That's really all this is about. We're extending gas about 1,000 feet into the town to pick up hundreds of millions of dollars of private investment buildings and for employment and for revenues. There's sort of there's a lot of back and forth. All I will say is that, because this is going to be part of the town dialogue going forward, and I think it's very important for people to recognize that it is not enough to stand in front of a microphone and announce that your goal is to be free of something by some date. Because we live in the real world. We're sitting in a room with the lights are on. We want to build something, we need power for the building. The electrical service into the town of Douglas is not adequate for our current existence as a town. So we oversubscribe the electrical infrastructure in the town of Douglas. And it's just that not everybody's using their load at the same time is the only reason why we don't blow transformers. So to seriously talk about moving towards a certain direction, the substations and other capacity of the town have to be increased, which is an overall policy that needs to be championed by somebody in a significant level of authority, as the governor of the legislature. But sitting here today, we couldn't electrify these buildings if we wanted to. There isn't enough juice to give them. They have already requested a certain amount of amps for their buildings, and National Grid said, no, we can only give you 1/3 of what you've asked for, and if you want more, we need to study the problem for 4 months. So that's where we are with that. You can tell we get a little excited about it because the perspective from a glass building in Boston is not the same as a perspective from Douglas. We had a pre-construction meeting here today regarding the sewer project. So this is the project that is funded by federal grant money through the Economic Development Administration. It'll be in the same general neighborhood as the water. So we're extending both wastewater and water resources to the buildings that are being built. The one area that's a little bit different in this second project is that we are going to run water main upgrades up Northeast Main eventually at the end of this year-long project. That street will be dug up and the water main service will now be connected by the private investor. So they're going to connect Northeast Main to Gilboa with their own pipe on their own property and create a loop, which is very beneficial for all involved. So that project will probably start with staging on November 7th, The road will start to get ground up November 8th. They'll be in the ground by the 14th. This is all, this coming November, knock on wood, right? That the weather holds out for us, and the idea is to have all of the sewer pipe in before the snow flies, before the weather makes it possible to do that. So that in the spring, when the new pump station comes in, it'll be put in place, connected to all the lines, the water work would get done, and we'd be out of the project. So that's where we are with that $3 million project. We're starting to work on the budget. I'll put this out there for you. The comp table adjustments are extremely challenging, right? This is a project that is often farmed out to consultants from whatever firm to do a wage and compensation study, and they go through everything. And my personal view is, we're here day to day, the department heads and I, and we have a small staff. So I just can't in my own mind justify spending anywhere from $35,000 to $70,000 to have a bunch of think tank people come in from the Collins Center or anywhere else and tell us what we already know. We're the ones who have to make decisions and categorize certain positions at certain levels of compensation. So it's incumbent on us to do that investigation and come up with recommendations for people. My goal all along has been to find a way to create enough room in the operating budget to do the comp reform without a huge aberration from where we were headed revenue-wise anyway. In other words, to hold the line on expenses and use the increase in the levy and the new growth for compensation reform. It's challenging to accomplish this, right? Because we are in a high inflation period. So the best way for us to cut costs isn't going to be to find the cheapest gas, because the cheapest gas is already that much more expensive than last year's gas. We just need to use less of it if we can. And perhaps hold back on some, spending on operational expenses and just focus on the people at this point. It's an important message to send because we'll be heading into at the end of the next fiscal year, we'll be renewing contracts with public safety employees who have one more year left in their contract. So I really want to get this done this year because I think when looking at competitive benchmarks, we are off the pace. And as we recruit, we have been very fortunate that staff here is well networked in their profession and are bringing people to us that want to work here, and people are willing to accept, a wage that's roughly the same or lower than where they were because they want to be here. The hours are a little bit different. We're closed, most departments are closed on Friday, and there's a little bit of a benefit there for folks. But in a sustained period of time, over the next 3 or 4 years, we're not going to be able to get people in here with a comp table the way it is. That's the premise, the opening premise. And in order to sell this to everyone, I want to make sure I'm documenting that very carefully so that people can refer to every position I'm talking about and see what the hiring boards at the MMA website are telling you you can get if you leave Douglas. If that gap gets to be too big, then it's too hard for people to say no. So I've been spending a lot of time on this for a long time now. But my original plan was to put it before fall town meeting so I could use it as the budget baseline going into annual town meeting. It's just not done yet, and I don't want to rush it by people. I think the worst thing you can do with a compensation reform is rush people through it, because then people feel like you're trying to get something by them. I'm going to take our time. We're going to be very detailed, disclose each and every position, what our rationale was. We will do it in annual town meeting, but I will be preparing the budget with the hope that it would pass. All right, so there's a little bit of a dance there. So the hope is to still get this done now, so the select board, finance committee, anybody else who wants to weigh in on it has a chance to really work their way through. I think the one thing that we've talked about in great detail and seems to have universal support everywhere I've pitched it anyway is the reform of the call firefighter rates of compensation and the alignment of the call firefighter ranks and responsibilities and their rates of compensation more to match and mesh with the full-time a little bit more closely than it does now. As we are definitely underpaying some of our most loyal call people. So that's, by way of update, I think that's probably where I want to stop. I mean, I could
Okay.
talk all night, but
When you try to recruit people to work for the town, you kind of, you know, show the benefits of working for a municipality over working in private sector. I mean, you have guaranteed pension. Those who are in the private sector or in their own business, if they've taken a look at their 401K lately, they know where their guaranteed pension has gone right down the tubes. I think we have very generous vacation schedules. Every two-bit holiday is a holiday. So there's a lot of benefits that people who work for the municipality get that those who are working out in the private sector are not getting. And I think that's worth a lot of money. You know, I mean, what's the age at what, 55 years old, you can retire with full benefits if you've had enough time?
if you have enough time.
I mean,
It's a low percentage. I met that threshold. It's a low percentage. It's 20 years, 55, I met it.
Yeah.
I was looking for people to sign up for meals.
yeah. I don't know, I see police officers that are retiring at 55 years old, and that they must be getting enough compensation to be able to live, or they wouldn't quit their job.
People have individual circumstances for sure, and that's in a different section than what we would be in.
The appeal there is to retire from your Massachusetts police officer job.
Yeah.
Go to Rhode Island and get a job in the private sector as a director of security or some other thing. It doesn't hit your pension in Massachusetts. So you continue to collect your pension, continue to collect. Even if you work for another municipality in Rhode Island, you can get both. So my chief in Tiverton had been a lieutenant in Swansea. He retired as a lieutenant in Swansea, came to work with us for chief. The guy was doing all right.
What is the percentage that they get of their salary when they retire? What's the percentage?
If they're all in,
Yeah.
you can get up to, what, 80%?
So what's all in mean?
Qualified, so you're fully vested at the maximum number of years.
Yeah.
There's a chart. Like, I think I was 55 with 20 years. I think I was like 30%. It wasn't, and the other thing you have to look at too is, you know, if.
Police officers are group 1,
Yeah.
civilians are B group,
Because
whatever
if you
it's
start
group 4.
if you start at like 21, then you really got to raise, right?
But, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
to answer, Carol's observations are on point. I would only say that there's one of the things that we find challenging with recruiting young people
Yeah.
is they have no vision at all when it comes to pensions or even the cost of health insurance. They don't appreciate the benefit, and it's really hard. You try to get through to them. I remember especially recruiting police officers, not here, but in Rhode Island. I'd say, you have to be out of your mind not to recognize that our pension plan is 80% funded, we're hitting all our targets, you're going to get health care for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
What are you thinking? And it's like, I want that extra 5,000, I'm going to go work for that town. It's the money in hand now, cash is king, and there's definitely that as people go along, if deeper into their career, they're very attractive to us because they have a lot of experience, perhaps, in municipal affairs or even in the private sector that are translatable to our situation. When people leave certain kinds of jobs at a certain point in their career, then you have to investigate carefully what baggage they might have, why are they leaving, what's their job history. So it just becomes a more involved process. But I don't think anybody doesn't already know this, I'm just going to say it for the record. There's just a shortage of everybody for everything. Right, so try to find a CDL, good luck. Try to find medics, paramedics to work in fire departments. I mean, everybody who's punched their ticket has found a way to get to their maximum salary, and we just have to keep up or we won't get them. The state of Massachusetts having a crisis getting plow drivers for this winter.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to say Douglas doesn't, we figured out the strategy for keeping people, everybody's coming back.
Good.
You pay them timely, right?
But Carol,
That's
we
half
do
the battle.
try.
Half the towns don't.
We do try to state that, this pension, when we try to,
What else is on that list?
Yep.
What's that?
What else is on that?
Not much.
that much.
Okay, ready to carry on, everybody? So, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, we're going to meet 6:30 on the 16th, so we don't have another meeting until then. And then December 12th, we just have Worcester Regional Retirement. I don't think we have anything else for December 12th.
Probably approving minutes.
Oh, right, okay. Anybody have anything else for us?
Oh, I have a question. If we have snow, when we go on Zoom,
Sure.
when we, I know that COVID is over, but,
Just let me know, and I'll make sure that there's a
yeah,
Zoom.
but I know, well, maybe I asked Matt, it's legal. Is it legal?
You won't let me get away from the table,
I-
Carol.
I-
You're just cracking that whip tonight, aren't you? So the good news, Mr. Chairman, for Carol is that the COVID era, exemptions or exceptions to the Open Meetings Act have been extended through April. So through the winter, you can have a Zoom meeting. Nobody has to be physically present here if you can't make it, but you could still meet on Zoom,
Okay.
as long as somebody is here to turn it on.
Gene, you had something.
I did. I just wanted to let the committee know that free cash was certified at $2,480,175. If all articles are approved from your recommendations in town meeting, that would be $608,000, and that will leave $1,872,175.
Okay.
So to be determined at town meeting.
And I would like to say that that is all of our department heads who don't go run out and spend every dime they have to. I think we have to commend those people that run a tight ship and that we do have free cash.
Hey, they answer to us.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn, anybody?
Oh, I
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded by Lynn. Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? We adjourn at 9:13. Thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you
coming.
very much.
Recording stopped.